When two teenage girls are sentenced to death for a crime they didn't commit, their last hope is a name they've never dared to speak aloud until now. But when that name turns out to belong to the U.S. Attorney General, everything changes. Will a father who never knew he had daughters be able to save them before it's too late? Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're watching from today. Now settle in, because this isn't just a story about justice, it's a story about family, redemption, and how far a man will go when blood calls to blood. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the faint tick of the wall clock. Two teenage girls stood before the judge, both in handcuffs, both far too young to face a death sentence. Their names were Amara and Jade, 17 years old, black, brilliant, and utterly alone. The judge didn't meet their eyes as he read the verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder, sentenced to death by lethal injection. No gasps, no murmurs from the gallery, because no one in that room had ever intended to fight for them. Amara's knees buckled. Jade closed her eyes and whispered something only she could hear. The courtroom didn't care. It had done its job swift, efficient, and merciless. What no one said aloud was that the police officer who died that night wasn't killed by these girls. He was shot by his own partner in a moment of panic in the dark. But someone decided it was easier to pin the blame on two black girls than to admit the truth. There was no real evidence, no witness who saw them fire a gun, just fear and the color of their skin. The public defender barely tried. The prosecutor didn't even break a sweat. And the judge? He called it justice as the bailiff reached for Amara. Something snapped. Amara yanked back, her eyes wild, her voice trembling with fury and terror. Wait, call our father. His name is Marcus Tatiz, the U.S. Attorney General. The room froze. Time stopped. Even the judge's gavel hung midair. Marcus Tate, the most powerful lawman in the country, was he really their father? Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. The prosecutor paled. The judge gripped the bench as if it might slip away. Amara's voice broke again, louder now, desperate. Call him, please. Then silencia, a thick, heavy silence, like a storm cloud ready to burst. In the back row, someone stood and slipped out, already dialing a phone. No one knew if Amara was telling the truth, but suddenly everyone realized they might have just sentenced the Attorney General's daughters to death. Worse, he didn't even know they existed. In a marble-walled conference room deep inside the Department of Justice, Attorney General Marcus Tate was midway through a national security briefing, charts, numbers, threat levels, all urgent but impersonal. Then came a soft knock at the door. His longtime chief of staff, Caleb, stepped in, his face unreadable, and handed Marcus a single sheet of paper. No words were needed. Marcus read it once, then again. Two teenage girls sentenced to death in Georgia. One had shouted his name in court, claiming he was their father. He froze. Amara and Jade Carter. The names meant nothing at first. Then Caleb added one more detail. Their mother's name was Lena. Lena Carter. And just like that, the walls of the government room seemed to blur. 18 years. It had been 18 years since he'd last seen her, since she vanished without a note, without a call, just silence. Marcus hadn't forgotten her. He never could. She'd been the only woman who ever made him feel like just a man, not a politician, not a lawyer, just Marcus. That summer, they were inseparable: music, protests, late-night coffee. Lena laughed like the world was hers, and when she looked at him, he felt truly seen. Until one day, she was gone. Now her daughters stood on death row, and one of them had eyes just like hers. Marcus dismissed the briefing. In his private office, Caleb pulled the birth certificates. Lena had died 2 years ago, heart failure. The girls were born 17 years prior. No father listed. No relatives. No safety net. They drifted through foster care, juvenile detention, and now a courtroom that wanted them erased. Marcus studied their photographs. Amara's stare was steady, defiant, familiar. Then he saw at Lena's gaze, that quiet storm behind the eyes, the same look she'd given him the night before she disappeared. They're mine, Marcus whispered. It wasn't certainty, it was instinct. But instinct wasn't enough. He ordered a DNA test, discreetly, through a private federal lab. Results in 48 hours. Inside, though, he already knew. That night, Marcus didn't go home. He sat in his study, lights off, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. Outside, the city hummed, traffic lights blinking, sirens wailing. Inside, time stood still. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a faded envelope, worn at the edges. Inside was the only photo he had of Lena barefoot on a porch railing, sunlight in her hair, a guitar nearby. She hated shoes, loved music, never stayed still for long. Marcus stared at the image for hours. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was soft, but no answer came, just the ticking of a distant clock. He tried to imagine it. Lena alone, pregnant, afraid. Maybe she thought his world wasn't safe for girls like hers. Maybe she'd lost faith in him. He'd never know. But what he did know, deep in his bones, was this: 2 children carrying his blood were fighting for their lives, and they had no one else. Until now. He'd spent his career defending the Constitution. But tonight, he wasn't the Attorney General. He was a father, late, unprepared, but here. And when morning came, he wouldn't rest until he knew the truth, until those girls were safe. Because some names don't fade, and some calls, no matter how long delayed, must be answered. She vanished from his life without warning. Now her daughters are calling his name from death row. What else has been buried with the truth? Let's keep going. Past is just beginning to rise. The medical wing of Crestwood Correctional Center was always cold, not from the air, but from the silence. Jade lay curled on a narrow cot, her breath shallow. The white sheet barely rose over her chest. She hadn't eaten in days. Every cough brought blood to her sleeve, more today than yesterday. But that wasn't what scared her. What scared her was the music fading. Her fingers trembled as she unrolled a square of prison toilet paper, treating it like something sacred. With a pencil stub barely longer than her thumb, she pressed lead to paper, line by line, rewriting a melody she and Amara had played as children. They called it New Dawn. Soft notes at first, hopeful, then shadows, then silence, and finally a fight to rise. It was their story in harmony. Now the music bled where she coughed, tiny red specks mixing with the graphite. She kept writing anyway. It was the only thing that still felt like hers. Across the prison, in a different wing, Amara was anything but still. Her fists pounded the concrete wall, her voice raw from screaming. She'd begged for news of her sister, begged for a doctor, begged for mercy. She got nothing, just tear gas under the door, guard with shields, and fresh bruises to match the old ones. She lay on the cold floor, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks, trying not to cry. But what broke her wasn't the isolation, it was remembering the sound of Jade's laugh and not knowing if she'd ever hear it again. They weren't always broken. Once, they were girls in matching pajamas, playing Beethoven on a second-hand piano with a stuck F key. Their mother, Lena, had taught them to read sheet music before they could spell their full names. One day, she'd say, "I'm taking you both to Chicago. We'll play at Symphony Hall. People will cry, clap, and you'll know what freedom feels like." They believed her, even when the fridge was empty, even when the rent was late, even when the car groaned before it crashed on a rain-slick highway and took her away forever. After that came strangers, new beds, new Relesno music. Foster care wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was indifferent. But Amara never stopped protecting Jade, and Jade never stopped writing music. Even here, even now, in a quiet hour, while cleaning the corner of her tiny cell, Amara found an old bag, one of the few things they'd carried from home to home. Inside was a faded envelope, torn at the corner, unsent. She unfolded it with shaking hands. The paper was fragile, but the handwriting was Lena's, fluid, careful. "Marcus, if you're reading this, it means I found the courage to tell you the truth." Amara stopped breathing. "They're yours. Both of them. I never stopped loving you. I was just afraid off your world, of mine, of what they'd do if they knew." It wasn't signed. It wasn't finished. But the name at the top was clear: Marcus Tate. Her father, the Attorney General, the man she'd screamed for in court because of a letter her mother never sent. Amara sat still for a long time, The paper pressed to her chest like a lifeline. She didn't know if he'd come, didn't know if he'd believe her. But now she knew she wasn't screaming into nothing, she was screaming toward someone. In the silence of a prison, two sisters cling to the only things left, a song and a name. But will it be enough to reach a man who never knew they existed? Keep listening, the walls are starting to crack. When evidence vanishes from a courtroom record, they call it a clerical error. Marcus Tate didn't believe in coincidences. That afternoon, Caleb walked into his office with a tight expression and a thin file in hand. The first officer on the scene, the night Amara and Jade were arrested, he said. Name's Ray Carver. He wrote the initial report, but he's gone from every official court document. No testimony, not even a mention. Marcus looked up sharply. Find him, no matter what it takes. It took nearly a day of digging. Ray Carver had fallen off the map, living in a forgotten corner of Georgia rusted-out town with more stray dogs than people. No cell signal, one gas station. The kind of place where secrets don't just stay buried, they turn to stone. He lived alone in a weathered trailer tucked behind a dying oak grove, a ghost of a man, hiding from something darker. Marcus drove out himself, no entourage, no badge, just a man chasing the truth. He knocked once, twice. The third time, the door creaked open. Carver stood in the shadows, sunken eyes, stained shirt, stubble like wire. He looked like he hadn't slept in a year. Amara and Jade, Marcus said quietly. I think you were the last person to see them free. Carver hesitated, then turned and walked inside, leaving the door ajar. The trailer smelled of stale smoke and silence. A faded photo was taped to the fridge, a young girl in a green dress, mid-twirl, laughing, frozen in time. Marcus took it in. Carver followed his gaze. Sophie, my daughter. He sat at a chipped kitchen table and lit a cigarette with shaking hands. I wrote the real report. Said the girls were unarmed, scared, crying. One of them raised her hands, begged us to help the other. He stared at the glowing tip of his cigarette. Sheriff told me to change it. Said had to look clean. Said we needed the story to match the charge. Marcus's voice was low but firm. Why didn't you testify? Carver's eyes flicked to the photo again. His hand twitched. I tried. Called internal affairs, left messages. A long pause. The words came out brittle. 3 nights later, Sophie was almost hit by a black SUV. No plates. Never found the driver. He looked up, eyes sharp with something closer to grief than fear. Didn't need a note. I got the message. Marcus didn't speak, didn't move. The silence hung thick, broken only by the hum of a failing fridge. Then Carver stood, walked to the corner of the room, and pried open a loose panel in the wall. From behind it, he pulled a tin box wrapped in cloth. I kept the original, he said, voice barely a whisper. Didn't know why. Maybe I just needed to know I wasn't completely spineless. He placed the box on the table and opened it. Inside was the truth. Marcus unfolded the documents with steady hands, the original police report, photos from the scene showing no weapons near either girl, handwritten notes scratched out in the trial version, a quote from Amara screaming, "She's hurt. My sister needs help," a timestamp that didn't match the prosecution's timeline, a body cam reference that had mysteriously malfunctioned in court. It was everything. Carver stared at the folder like it was poison. I'm not talking to the press. I won't testify. Not again. I won't put her through that. Marcus nodded. I didn't come to exploit you. I came to finish what you tried to start. Carver didn't answer, just gave a slow, quiet nod. That night, in a dim motel room, Marcus and Caleb spread the papers across a table stained with coffee rings. They studied every line, every date, every scribble. The story hadn't changed, but the system had changed the story. Now, the first real crack had appeared. A witness had tried to speak, and they'd nearly killed his daughter to silence him. But now, the silence was breaking. The truth was stepping into the light. The question was, who was most afraid of it? The cell was too quiet. Jade hadn't moved in hours, her body curled tight on the thin mattress. Face turned to the wall, arms wrapped around herself like she could hold her heartbeat together. A small strip of toilet paper, her makeshift sheet music lay beside her, stained with dark red blood. The melody she'd written, note by trembling note, now ran like watercolor. New Dawn, her last song. Across the prison, Amara's fist slammed against the cold metal door again and again until her knuckles split. She needs help, she screamed, voice raw. She's dying. Her cries echoed down the corridor, unanswered, swallowed by thick walls and indifference. Footsteps passed once, then silence. She collapsed to her knees, forehead pressed to the door, blood smearing her hands. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered through the metal. "Not like this." Hundreds of miles away, the world turned quietly. Inside a sterile federal lab, a screen blinked to life. A notification flashed. DNA results matched, 99.9%. Marcus Tate stood motionless, eyes locked on the result. A slow exhale escaped him, almost a gasp. He reached for the table, but missed and sank into the chair behind him. He didn't speak, didn't move. For the first time in his life, the U.S. Attorney General didn't know what to do. The law, his greatest weapon, felt powerless now, cold, slow, too polite for a system that let children rot behind steel doors. These were his daughters, and one was slipping away. He pictured Jade's eyes, same as Lena's the mother who'd vanished without explanation, the woman he'd loved but never understood. Why hadn't she told him? Why did she leave? He thought of every courtroom victory, every press briefing, every bill signed. None of it mattered now. The one thing he couldn't fight was time, and time was running out. Back in the prison, a guard finally noticed something was wrong. A call was made. Footsteps pounded down the corridor. Jade's door slammed open, and two nurses rushed in. Her body was limp, her lips blue. One nurse pressed fingers to Jade's throat, a faint pulse, barely there. "Let's go now." They wheeled her out as Amara stood behind the glass, fists trembling against the barrier, tears carving tracks down her face. Marcus sat in his office in total silence. Lights off, the city glowing dimly outside. In his hands, he held the reporter's name at the top, Amara, and Jade at the bottom. His daughters, not just a case, not just wronged citizens' blood. And one was dying. When justice is too slow and love is almost too late, what do you do? What happens when the law you've lived by isn't enough to save the people you love most? It started with a soft chime. Marcus glanced at the Scrieno sender. No subject, just one attachment. Listen before midnight. He hesitated, then clicked. The recording crackled to life, shuffling papers, a door closing, the hum of an old ceiling fan. Then a voice, confident, laced with arrogance. "Judge Harlan Vance. These girls, they need to be made an example. People like them multiply when you show weakness. I won't have this community flooded with their kind." Marcus's hand froze on the armrest. His pulse, steady moments before, now pounded in his chest. A long pause on the tape, then the clink of ice in a glass, a soft sip. "I've seen it before, let one in, and the whole house crumbles. Justice has to look controlled." But as Vance trailed off, a second voice emerged, faint, female, a breath more than a statement. "Judge Vance, this isn't right." Marcus's eyes widened. That voice, Clara Hayes, Vance's clerk, always quiet, always watching. She wasn't meant to be heard, but someone had recorded her fear. Marcus had her address. No bodyguards, no FBI, just him in a gray coat, heartburning. When he reached Clara's building, the hallway smelled of bleach and lavender. Her apartment door was ajar. One lamp flickered inside. A steaming mug sat untouched on the counter. Her monogrammed scarf hung on a chair. Nothing broken, nothing stolen, just wrong. A neighbor peeked from behind a cracked door, whispering. They said she fell. Paramedics took her last night, but she wasn't bleeding, just dazed, like she'd seen something awful. Marcus's chest tightened. He called the hospital. Clara Hayes, admitted mild head trauma, temporary memory loss, no visitors. But there were no x-rays showing injury, no concussion protocol. When Marcus arrived at the ICU, two plainclothes men sat in the lobby, pretending to read newspapers. The nurse at the desk wouldn't meet his eyes. Clara was behind the glass, sitting upright, eyes blank, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her stillness felt practiced, like someone had told her exactly how much to remember. That night, Marcus sat in his motel room, staring out a rain-streaked window. The audio file played again in his head, word for word Vance's voice, Clara's whisper, the silence that followed. This wasn't just about one corrupt judge anymore. This was a chain, a system of shadows where the law wore a mask and justice had learned to whisper. The next morning, Caleb entered pale. We traced the IP address that sent the file. It bounced through 6 proxies, but the origin was the courthouse. He paused. The timestamp on that audio was recorded during a live trial, in chambers. Whoever did this was right next to Vance. Someone inside. Marcus didn't speak. He didn't need to. The war had begun, and the first crack in the armor had come from within. When the system silences the truth, it doesn't vanish, it lingers, it whispers, and eventually, even the quietest voice can start an earthquake. The ICU smelled of antiseptic and silence. Marcus stood just outside the glass wall, his hands trembling, something that had never happened in courtrooms, not even before the Supreme Court. But this wasn't about justice anymore. This was blood, this was flesh, this was his daughter. Inside, Jade lay motionless, a tangle of wires, tubes, and machines surrounding her small frame. The oxygen mask covered half her face, but her eyes, those soft, stubborn eyes, were open, watching. A monitor beeped steadily, in rhythm with her heart, too slow, too fragile. Dr. Patel's voice was low, gentle, but hit like a gavel. It's a congenital condition, hereditary. If she'd received treatment, in-time medication, regular monitoring, it would have been manageable, maybe even reversible. Marcus closed his eyes. 18 years of silence, systems, mischances. This wasn't just neglect, it was by design. They hadn't just imprisoned the girls, they'd watched them rot. Across the hall, Amara sat in a steel chair, hands cuffed to a bolted table, eyes locked on her father. She didn't cry, didn't flinch when Marcus entered the room, didn't move, just stared, like looking at a ghost. He sat across from her, unsure where to begin. She beat him to it. You knew her name. You knew our mother. So why didn't you ever look for us? Her voice was steel, the same steel that ran through his bones. Marcus didn't try to explain, didn't speak of the nights he'd wondered, didn't mention the unanswered letters or the void Lena left. He met her gaze and said only, I didn't know. But now that I do, I'll burn the world to fix it. Amara blinked once. The fury didn't vanish, but something softened behind her eyes, something tired, something that had waited a very long time for someone to say they cared enough to burn. A nurse stepped in. You have 5 minutes. They walked him to Jade's bedside. She looked so small, so fragile. But when he leaned closer, her fingers moved slightly, and her lips parted beneath the mask. A whisper, dry, weak, but unmistakably hers. Don't forget the melody. Marcus bowed his head, tears slipping silently down his face. This wasn't just about law anymore. This was a promise, a song, a new dawn. And he wouldn't let the world silence them again. When a daughter whispers, a father listens. And when justice fails, love must speak louder. It began with a blink. Clara opened her eyes to the sterile hum of a hospital room. Fluorescent lights buzzed above. A monitor beeped at her side, and on the tray next to her bed sat her notebook unmarked, blank, too clean. But her memory hadn't vanished, not completely. Fragments returned like broken glass, piecing together Vance's voice. The private jury room. Words no one should say in a courtroom. They need to be made an example. And the list, she remembered the list. The jurors weren't chosen. They were handpicked, filtered, groomed. Anyone who might show compassion was removed. That afternoon, she asked for a lawyer, then asked for Marcus Tate. She looked tired when he arrived, shoulders slumped, lips cracked, but her voice was steady. You were right. It's not just Vance. It's the whole machine. She handed over a flash drive, encrypted, password protected. Everything's here: jury tampering, private transcripts, back-channel emails. He didn't just rig one case. He's been doing it for years. Marcus didn't speak. He nodded and walked out, carrying more than a driva carried the matchstick to light a nation. Within hours, it was done. The documents went live across every major outlet: CNN, NPR, the New York Times. Headlines burned through the internet like wildfire. Explosive allegations. Judge Vance accused of systemic jury tampering. DOJ confirms federal oversight. Marcus Tate issues personal statement. Justice has a soundtrack, the Carter Twins, and the melody called New Dawn. That night, news anchors turned solemn. Screens split between courtroom footage and ICU updates. Photos of Amara in chains. Jade's bloodied music sheet. Marcus standing alone outside the courthouse, hand over heart. Social media erupted. New Dawn: Justice for the Carters, fix the system. Churches held vigils. Orchestras played the melody on courthouse steps. High school students rewrote the piece and posted it with captions like, "This is for everyone who was ever silenced." Then came a news alert, short and stark. Clara Hayes, key witness in the Carter case, has come forward. A special hearing has been granted. All charges are now under federal review. Marcus sat in his office, hands steepled, eyes burning. Justice was coming, not quiet, not polite. This time, justice had a name and a melody. Sometimes it takes one voice to wake a courtroom, but it takes truth to wake a nation. The federal courtroom felt like a cathedral: high ceilings, polished wood, a silence so thick the room itself seemed to hold its breath. Cameras weren't allowed, but every major news outlet waited outside, and across the country, Americans were glued to live streams, refreshing blogs, hoping this time justice wouldn't blink. On the courtroom monitor, a fragile image flickered: Jade, lying in her hospital bed, eyes half open, watching from miles away. She wouldn't speak today, but she would witness everything. Marcus Tate rose slowly from his seat. No badge, no podium, no notes. He walked to the center of the courtroom and stood as a man stripped to what mattered to father. "I've spent a lifetime defending the law," he said, voice steady but low. "But nothing prepared me for defending my own children." He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. The truth thundered through every word. This wasn't a case of oversight. This was design. They didn't just fail my daughters, they buried them quietly, efficiently, because the system is working exactly as it was built to. He looked up. "But that ends today." He stepped back. The room shifted. All eyes turned to the defense table. Amara stood, her hands unshackled this time. Her navy dress was simple but strong. She looked like a young woman who'd survived something unimaginable and was still standing. "No teatrix, no enferjustrus." She didn't speak long. She didn't need to. "We weren't dangerous," she said, her voice clear and even. "We were just black and brilliant." The room fell still. That one sentence hung like a verdict. The judge removed her glasses, folded her hands, and spoke slowly, every word carrying the weight of a nation. "After reviewing the evidence and testimony presented, this court hereby vacates all charges against Amara and Jade Carter, with immediate effect." Murmurs erupted, then full-blown gasps as she continued. "Furthermore, this court recommends a full federal investigation into the judicial system of this state, effective today. This jurisdiction will operate under federal oversight." The courtroom was silent for a moment, then broke into soft applause, muffled sobs, prayers whispered behind trembling hands. On the hospital screen, Jade's lips curled into the faintest smile. A nurse gently wiped her tears. Two U.S. Marshals entered the chamber, moving with quiet precision toward the gallery. Judge Vance rose, his expression unreadable, but the cuffs, those same cuffs once locked on two innocent girls, clicked shut with deliberate finality, a poetic sound. Outside, crowds began to chant, "New dawn. Justice now. Say their name." Inside, Marcus didn't celebrate. He sat down, placed his hand over his heart, and closed his eyes. His daughters were free, but the fight for all the others still unseen had just begun. Truth can be buried, but once it rises, it brings the whole system with it. The chandeliers above Symphony Hall shimmered like frozen stars. Golden light bathed the stage. The seats were full: musicians, judges, students, families, and people who'd marched written, wept, and prayed for two girls who once had no voice. Now the world had gathered to listen. On stage, Amara adjusted the piano bench. Her fingers, once bruised from prison walls, now rested gently on polished ivory keys. Behind her, Jade stood in a long blue gown, fragile but glowing like moonlight after a storm. No one spoke, there was no need. What came next wasn't just music, it was memory, it was justice, it was survival set to melody. The first notes drifted through the hall, soft as a whisper. Amara's hands moved like they'd always belonged there, confident, elegant, precise. Jade's voice joined, low, breathy at first, then rising, warm and clear like light through stained glass. This is for the nights behind concrete, for the bruises that didn't break the beat, for the songs we kept singing even when no one was listening. In the front row, Marcus sat motionless, no suit, no podium, just a father. Clara sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his. Tears filled his eyes, not from sorrow, but from the weight of grace. He didn't speak, but the way his fingers gripped Clara's hand said everything. I'm here now. I'll never be too late again. The music swelled, layered with defiance, sorrow, hope. Each note told a story of piano lessons in foster homes, of chains turned to cords, of new dawns fought for, not given. By the final verse, the audience was on its feet, no clapping yet, just silence, sacred, electric silence, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Then the final chord rang out, clear, whole, like something long broken had finally come together. The hall erupted thunderous applause. Some cried, some stood in awe, but in every heart that night, something shifted. They hadn't just witnessed a performance, they'd witnessed a resurrection. And somewhere far from the spotlight, a little girl with a broken flute heard the melody and knew she wasn't alone anymore. The story doesn't end here, right? Begins again every time someone chooses to stand and sing. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit the subscribe button so you never miss a story that matters. Your support means the world. It's what fuels us to keep creating meaningful, powerful content. Thank you for listening. Let's keep lifting voices that deserve to be heard.